I still remember the day my daughter-in-law posted a picture of herself standing in front of her new beach house with the caption, "My mother-in-law got a junk scrap yard. I got the $2 million mansion." People in the comments felt sorry for me. They said I must be heartbroken, living in dirt while she lived in luxury. My own son, Evan, clicked like on her post instead of correcting her. For a moment, I believed everyone else might be right. Maybe I really had been left with nothing, but one phone call from an environmental company changed everything. A man said they detected something unusual under my land. When they returned with armed guards and geological reports, I finally learned what my property was hiding. Before I tell you what they found, let me show you how all of this started. My name is Janet Rowell, and I have lived on my rural property in Willow Creek, North Carolina, for almost 40 years. The land looks rough on the outside, filled with old metal scraps and rusted machines from the salvage yard my husband Richard once ran. Most people see a mess, but I see memories. Richard built that yard piece by piece, working through long summers and cold winters. After he passed away, I kept the property exactly as he left it, even though many people told me to clear it out or sell it for parts. I never felt embarrassed about it. The yard reminded me of the life we built together, and I felt closest to him when I walked between the old machines he worked so hard to restore. Life stayed quiet after he died. My sister Harper visited often, bringing groceries and keeping me company on the porch. My neighbor, Mr. Duke, fixed small things when I needed help. My son Evan, however, slowly drifted away after marrying Sabrina. She loved attention and comfort. She filled her social media with expensive clothes, vacations, and stories that made her look like she was living a dream. When she and Evan inherited a beach house from Richard's distant cousin, she bragged about it for months. One day, she looked me in the eye and said, "You got stuck with a trash yard, and we got paradise." Evan said nothing. He just stood behind her while she compared her luxury to my life as if I were a burden instead of family. Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. People online believed her version of my life. They pitied me for living among junk. They said I deserved more than what I got. I tried to ignore it, reminding myself that I had peace, memories, and a home that mattered to me. But her constant mocking chipped away at my confidence. I started wondering if my life really had turned into something people should feel sorry for. I never imagined that everything would change with a single phone call from a company I had never heard of. One Tuesday morning, the phone rang. A man from TerraScan Environmental Services introduced himself and said, "Ma'am, our satellite imaging picked up something unusual beneath your property." His voice was calm, but his words pulled me out of my chair. I had no idea that one sentence was about to turn my entire world upside down. If you're enjoying the story so far, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The real trouble began the morning after TerraScan Environmental Services called. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the phone, replaying the man's voice in my mind. He said their satellite imaging had detected something unusual underground. I had lived on that land most of my life and never once thought there was anything special beneath it. The property was just a patch of soil, old metal, weeds, and memories. Still, I agreed to let them examine it. By noon, a white truck and several utility vehicles pulled into my long gravel driveway. Workers climbed out, wearing plain uniforms and carrying clipboards, tripods, and drilling equipment. The neighbors slowly gathered along their fences, watching like a small-town crowd waiting for a parade to start. My sister Harper stood next to me on the porch, arms crossed, trying to read the seriousness on the workers' faces. One of the engineers approached me and said, "We will need a few soil samples from different points on the property. It will be loud, but we should finish today." I nodded, not fully understanding what they hoped to find. As the drilling began, loud metal machinery cut through the quiet morning air. Dust rose around the yard. The workers marked several spots with flags, drilled deep into the earth and collected thick, layered samples of soil and rock. The sound was overwhelming at times, echoing across the empty fields around my home. Through it all, Harper stayed close, asking the workers small questions and trying to lighten my nerves, but none of them gave clear answers. They were polite but guarded, which only made my anxiety grow. Later that afternoon, Evan and Sabrina came driving up the road just as one of the drilling rigs shut down. Sabrina stepped out with a smirk, holding her phone as if she were recording content for her social media page. "Wow, look at this," she said loudly. "Maybe they found a hidden vault of rust." A couple of workers glanced at her, clearly unimpressed, but they stayed professional. Evan walked up to me and asked, "Mom, what did you get yourself into?" His tone carried more judgment than concern. Harper stepped between us and said, "She did not get herself into anything. They asked her to run tests." But Sabrina would not let it go. She shook her head and said, "Watch. They will tell her it is contaminated or unstable. Then she will have to pay thousands to clean it. Just wait." Her confidence irritated me, but I kept my composure. I simply watched the workers pack up their equipment. Before leaving, the lead engineer handed me a card and said, "We will contact you once the samples are analyzed. Expect a call within a week." He looked like he wanted to say more but stopped himself and walked back to his truck. That slight hesitation stayed in my mind long after they drove away. A week later, the call came early in the morning while I was watering the small tomato patch behind my house. The same calm voice from Terrascan said, "Mrs. Rowell, we need to speak with you immediately. Our team will be arriving shortly, and we need you present." His tone was firmer this time, almost urgent. My heart began to pound. I told Harper, and she drove over without hesitation. By the time she arrived, we heard engines rumbling down the road. Not one, but several vehicles pulled into my driveway. A Terrascan truck stopped in front of my porch, followed by two black SUVs carrying uniformed officers. Evan and Sabrina, who must have heard from a neighbor, showed up minutes later and walked toward us with wide eyes. Sabrina whispered, "Why are there guards?" as if she suddenly regretted her own jokes. The lead geologist stepped out, holding a thick folder, and approached me slowly, treating me with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. He said, "Ma'am, we found something significant underneath your property." His voice was low, respectful, and steady. He gestured for us to sit, and we all moved toward the porch swing and chairs. Evan and Sabrina hovered close enough to hear every word. The geologist opened the folder and handed me the first report. My hands shook as I held the paper. He explained that the soil samples showed strong signs of a rare mineral formation used in high-demand technology. He said the density patterns on the scans matched those found at some of the most valuable mining sites in the world. I stared at the report, trying to understand what it meant. Sabrina leaned forward and asked, "So, what is it worth?" He did not answer her. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Mrs. Rowell, your land may contain one of the most valuable deposits recorded in this region. This is why we brought security. Discoveries like this can attract unwanted attention." My heart raced so hard I could hear it. For years, I had been mocked for living on a scrapyard. Now, experts with guards were standing on my porch, telling me my land could be worth a fortune. That was the moment everything changed, and I knew my life was about to take a path I never expected. When the geologist finished explaining the importance of the deposit, I felt as if the ground beneath me had shifted, not because of the minerals, but because my entire understanding of my life had changed in a single morning. I sat on the porch swing, gripping the thick reports in my hands, trying to make sense of numbers, charts, and terms I had never heard before. My sister Harper placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, reminding me that I did not have to understand everything immediately. Across the yard, Evan and Sabrina whispered to each other in hurried tones, their faces a mix of shock, envy, and sudden interest. Sabrina stepped forward, her voice softer than I had ever heard. She said, "You should sign whatever they give you. You might need help managing all this." Her words carried a tone that pretended to be supportive, but the hunger in her eyes revealed her true intentions. I kept the reports close to my chest and said nothing. I wanted time to breathe, time to think, and time to separate fear from opportunity. The Terrascan team explained that they were prepared to offer a preliminary drilling rights contract right away. The lead representative held out a folder filled with papers and said, "Mrs. Rowell, this contract secures you a very generous upfront payment with additional compensation once extraction begins. Companies will bid for rights, but we are offering first." His calm voice did little to ease the sudden pressure I felt. Signing a contract that large did not feel like something I should rush into, especially with my daughter-in-law watching like a hawk. I asked the representative, "Can I take some time to think?" He nodded and said, "Of course. We recommend legal review. This is a significant matter." That simple sentence grounded me again. I realized there was no reason to hurry, no reason to let anyone push me into a decision before I understood what it meant. Harper leaned closer and whispered, "You need a lawyer who works for you, not for them." I nodded, knowing she was right. Before I could say anything, Evan walked over and said, "Mom, we should help you with this. You cannot do it alone." His voice sounded rehearsed, as if he was trying to show authority while hiding his desperation. Sabrina stood behind him with her arms crossed, nodding as if she expected me to hand over control simply because she suddenly pretended to care. I looked at both of them and said calmly, "I will handle this the right way, and that means taking advice from someone who does not have anything to gain." Sabrina's jaw tightened, and I could tell she did not like hearing the truth spoken so plainly. The Terrascan team packed their equipment while the officers maintained distance, scanning the area as if someone might jump out of the woods and claim the land for themselves. When the last truck left the property, the yard fell quiet. The same quiet scrapyard that had once been a place of embarrassment in Sabrina's eyes now felt like the center of a secret I needed to protect. Harper helped me gather the reports, and we walked into the house together. I placed the folders on the kitchen table and stared at them, feeling the weight of responsibility. I remembered how Richard had spent years on that land, working hard and trusting that it held a future for us, even if neither of us could see it then. For the first time, I wondered if he had suspected something deeper, something beyond salvage metal and soil. I called a local attorney named Thomas Avery, someone Harper trusted from her own dealings. He answered politely, listened to my situation, and immediately scheduled a private meeting. At his office the next morning, his calm voice eased my growing anxiety, reminding me that I did not have to face this alone. After the call, I sat in silence, hearing only the ticking clock on the wall. Evan tried one more time to influence me by saying, "Mom, this is going to be complicated. You might not understand everything. Let us help you." His tone was gentle, but filled with the same dismissiveness Sabrina always showed. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I am not signing anything until I know exactly what I am agreeing to." He had no response. Sabrina looked offended, as if she expected me to rely on her judgment. I walked them to the door, thanked them for coming, and closed the door behind them. When I turned around, Harper smiled and said, "You did the right thing." That was the moment I felt a shift inside me. For years, I had been the quiet one, the one who let others assume things about me. Now I was standing on land worth more than anyone imagined, and I chose to protect it with clarity instead of panic. The true turning point was not the discovery beneath the soil. It was the moment I decided that my decisions would finally be my own, guided by respect for myself and the life I had built, not by the voices that once tried to belittle me. The next morning, I walked into attorney Thomas Avery's office carrying the thick folders Terrascan had given me, still unsure whether any of it could truly be as valuable as they claimed. His office was warm and organized, with shelves full of books and certificates that showed decades of experience. Thomas greeted me kindly, offered me coffee, and asked me to walk him through everything from the moment Terrascan first called. As I spoke, he listened without interruption, taking notes and studying every detail. When I handed him the geological reports, he adjusted his glasses and read quietly, turning each page slowly. I watched his face for a sign, any sign, of what he thought. Halfway through the first folder, his eyebrows rose slightly. By the time he finished the second one, he leaned back in his chair and let out a careful breath. He said, "Mrs. Rowell, this is one of the strongest mineral survey results I have ever seen." My hands tightened around the cup as he continued. He explained that the mineral detected beneath my property was rare, in high demand, and rapidly increasing in global value due to its use in advanced technology. Companies had paid extraordinary amounts for access to deposits far smaller than what the scans suggested was under my acreage. Thomas then opened the preliminary contract TerraScan had tried to hand me. He read the fine print, marked a few lines with his pen, and looked up with a firm expression. "This contract heavily favors their company, not you," he said. "If you had signed this without counsel, you would have given away most of your rights and almost all control over the extraction process." Hearing that made my stomach drop. I had no idea how close I had come to losing everything simply because someone appeared polite and professional. Thomas explained the true potential of the land in numbers that felt unreal. He said the drilling rights alone could be worth tens of millions of dollars, possibly more, depending on how deep the deposit runs. I stared at him, unsure whether I had heard him correctly. Tens of millions. Those were numbers I had only read in news articles about lottery winners, not phrases spoken to an older woman who lived in a small rural home filled with memories and rusted machines. I felt my eyes fill with tears, not from greed, but from relief. Relief that all the years I spent defending Richard's land, holding on to it while others mocked me, had not been foolish. It had been right. Something in that land had always been valuable, and now the world finally understood what my husband had left behind. Thomas leaned forward and said, "You are in a position to negotiate with multiple companies. Do not let anyone pressure you into acting quickly. You have every right to secure a fair and protected agreement." His words steadied me. For the first time since the discovery, I felt grounded, like I had someone who could guide me through a process far larger than anything I had faced. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Evan and Sabrina waiting in my driveway. They rushed toward me as soon as I stepped out of the car. Sabrina spoke first, trying to sound supportive, but unable to hide her urgency. "So, what did the lawyer say? You need us to help you understand the contract, right?" Evan stood behind her with an expression caught somewhere between hope and guilt. I calmly told them I would not be signing anything with TerraScan and that my attorney was reaching out to several other companies. Sabrina blinked hard, clearly surprised I had taken control. "Mom, this is huge," she said. "You do not know how to handle something this big." Her tone made it clear she still saw me as someone small. I answered with a steady voice, "You are right. That is why I hired someone who does." She did not expect that response and fell silent. Evan finally asked, "Is it really worth that much?" I looked at him and said, "More than any of us ever imagined." He lowered his gaze, realizing that the land he once ignored had turned into something priceless. Over the next week, Thomas negotiated with 3 major corporations interested in the deposit. They sent representatives to my property, each one offering more than the last. I stayed quiet during the meetings, letting Thomas speak on my behalf, trusting his expertise. Finally, one company presented a contract so balanced and generous that even Thomas smiled. It guaranteed me full ownership of the land, a large upfront payment, and a continuous percentage of the profits from every ounce extracted. When I signed the contract, I felt a wave of emotions flood through me. I thought of Richard, and how proud he would have been. I thought of all the times people pitied me for living on a scrapyard, assuming I had been left with nothing. And I thought of the moment TerraScan arrived, with guards and reports that revealed what lay beneath the soil I had walked on every day for years. My life did not just change, it transformed. Suddenly, I was not the woman with the junkyard. I was the woman sitting on one of the most valuable mineral deposits in the region. That discovery was the moment everything shifted. The moment I realized my life still held surprises, far bigger than I ever expected. Signing the final contract felt like closing a door on the life everyone assumed I was stuck in, and opening a new one that I never expected to step through. When Thomas handed me the signed documents and told me that all legal protections were in place, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt safe, respected, and firmly in control of my future. The company began setting up security measures around my property almost immediately, putting up fencing, cameras, and signs to ensure no one trespassed or tried to exploit what lay beneath the soil. Watching the workers arrive each morning with heavy equipment made me feel proud instead of embarrassed. The same land Sabrina once mocked as useless was now being treated like a treasure worth guarding. Harper visited often, bringing coffee and sitting beside me on the porch as we watched the progress. She would squeeze my hand and say, "Richard would be smiling right now," and every time she said it, I felt warmth spread through my chest. I used to walk across that yard imagining only the weight of memories, but now I walked across it, imagining a future full of possibilities that I once thought were out of reach. A few days after the final agreement, Evan and Sabrina came to speak with me. They looked uneasy, as if unsure how to approach me now that the balance of power had shifted. Evan spoke first, his voice soft and apologetic. He said, "Mom, I know we have not treated you right. I know Sabrina said things she should not have said, and I should have stood up for you." His eyes glistened slightly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like he was speaking from his heart instead of trying to impress someone. Sabrina stood beside him, without her usual confidence, and said, "I am sorry for how I talked about your property. I should not have posted what I did." Her apology was quiet, and although I did not fully trust her sincerity, I appreciated the effort. I told them that forgiveness was possible, but trust was something they would have to earn. Their shoulders relaxed a little, and I could tell they understood that I was not shutting them out, but I was no longer going to let them walk over me either. I made it clear that I would not be giving them money, but I would help them in ways that did not harm my boundaries. Evan nodded, accepting this with a maturity he had lacked for years, and that moment made me hopeful that our relationship might eventually heal. As the mining company moved forward with their project, the first deposit payment arrived in my bank account. Seeing that amount brought me to tears, not because of the money itself, but because I had spent so many years feeling underestimated. I used part of the funds to repair my home, starting with the roof Richard always said he would fix next. I updated the kitchen in a modest but comfortable style and replaced the old drafty windows. Then I set aside a large portion for charity, choosing programs that helped single mothers and veterans, groups Richard always admired. With another portion, I bought a small cottage near the coast, not a mansion like the one Sabrina bragged about, but a peaceful home with a quiet porch where I could listen to the waves and read books without interruption. When I walked through the cottage for the first time, I felt a sense of calm that reminded me of the early days of my marriage, when life was slow and simple and full of hope. I kept my scrap yard property, of course, because it was still home and because the company needed access to continue drilling. But having a second place to rest, away from the noise and attention, was a blessing I never thought I would receive. Word spread around Willow Creek about the discovery. People who once felt sorry for me now looked at me with surprise and admiration. I never cared much about the opinions of others, but I could not deny that something inside me healed when I realized how quickly pity can turn into respect. It made me understand something important. People see what they want to see. Sabrina saw rust and junk because she wanted to feel superior. Strangers online saw a sad woman because they wanted a story to gossip about. But beneath all that, beneath the soil itself, was value that only time could reveal. Richard always believed the land held potential, even if he never imagined it would be this kind. His faith in hard work and patience planted seeds that took decades to show themselves. I finally understood that nothing in life is truly small when it carries love and purpose. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, I sat on my porch and looked out over the yard that had defined so much of my life. The machines hummed in the distance and the workers waved to me as they passed. I thought about the years of struggle, the loneliness, the judgment, the pain of being dismissed and underestimated, and I realized that the biggest treasure beneath that land was not the mineral. It was the reminder that strength can grow in silence, and worth is often hidden where others refuse to look. My life had changed in ways I never expected, but more than anything, I felt grateful. Grateful for Richard's legacy. Grateful for the second chance life gave me. And grateful that I found courage at an age when many people believe their story is already written. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from.